Okay, people, so we'll take it from this angle. So, it is, what is it? October 18th, 2018. It's early morning, but not 5:30 in the morning, okay? I got up, I don't know. The sun was just coming out. So what's that, 6:30 or so? Anyway. This one I'm going to call In Trust, Doctor-Patient Relationships. Right? And it's regarding Amari. And that's because I went to the pediatrician yesterday to start figuring out what happened to Amari in terms of deprivation of oxygen to the brain at some point in his short little wee life, where it caused the symptoms of broad spectrum of cerebral palsy, which is not a specific illness, injury, or disease. That's what the doctor told me yesterday, because I went and seen him yesterday. He said cerebral palsy in itself is not a diagnosis. It's a general label of several things that could be factors to what influenced Amari's circumstances today, right? Because he can't move, people. I've been saying this in my videos. He doesn't move. He doesn't really move, right? Which is, very concerning and life-altering and just, it's another path I have to go down, people. And, it's like I tell Amari, we'll get through it, right? We'll get through it. I didn't notice anything, people, because I didn't hold Amari much when he was little, right? Because I wanted Shimei to parent her own baby. Now, this is how it happened for me when I was pregnant and young, and I went home to mom, and and my mom kicked me. Okay, I'll give you a short, brief history of how I learned to be a parent, okay? And then it will go into, I didn't want to make this a long video, but, this is so important, because you can't be afraid to face life, right? In death or in life, right? I have to face what happened to Shimei in death as I had her in life, right? Like yesterday, I went and got my teeth cleaned. I went in the mall and I started bawling like a baby, people. Malls are like a trigger for me. I go into a mall, I see all these people walking around, young, old, ugly, handsome, just fat and skinny and just, dressed to the tilt and looking all scruffy and, just different ethnic heritages. And I see all these people walking through the mall, and I don't see my daughter. All I see is a ghost, right? You know what I mean? Because she's trapped. She's trapped in some sort of, I don't know what she's trapped in, people, but she died in my basement, right? And it hasn't been determined as to how she died yet. So that right there puts her in a trapped state in a spiritual sense, right? And when I go to the mall, I see all these people walking around, and I ask myself, why is it that they can walk this planet? And then I multiply that by 9 billion people. Why is it that those people in that mall can walk this planet with the rest of the 9 billion people on this planet, but my daughter cannot? So I go into the dentist office bawling like a baby, because I haven't cried yet, people. So now I'm having to deal with my grandson not being able to move. Now let's take it back to 2015, when Uncle John went into the system because he had pneumonia, right? And because he was in his 70s, and he drank a lot of coffee. He was a heavy coffee drinker. He became a little dehydrated. We didn't know that coffee dehydrated old people, but it does. And Uncle John liked his coffee. And so he got a little delirium. You know, he wasn't delusional. He didn't have Alzheimer's. He didn't have any of those. He just got a little bit of delirium from the infection in his lungs. But we didn't know that. So, you know, him and I made that decision for him to go to the hospital just to be safe because he was old. Then he went to the hospital and he was in the hall for 2 days. And you know the story. In the end, he was medically kidnapped by people in Victoria that had no real relationship with him for years. And they destroyed his mind, people. They took away his freedom. They took away his choices. They took away his life. They took away his grandchildren. They took away me. You know? They took away everything so that they could take his money. They got his money. They did their little obituary, you know, and Uncle John is gone. So what I'm trying to say is, I went through that, and that affected all my kids. That's not what I was trying to say. There was a reason why I was trying to say that. It will come back to me. Oh, yes, I know now. So, before he was medically kidnapped, people, before he disappeared, right, and was never to be seen again, right, I was making plans for him to come home, right, and because he was so lethargic and couldn't stand up, and because they were doping him, right, you know, I had to figure out ways to move him within the house until he could gain his strength and walk and stand up. Right? Stand up and walk on his own to his best of ability where he felt comfortable with it, right? So I have this chair in my sewing room with wheels on it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put Uncle John on that chair, and when he wants to get out of bed, and if he can't walk, you know, and the kids aren't around, between him and I, he can get up on the chair, and then I can just wheel him down into the hall, into the kitchen, and then he can just scoot himself onto the chair, because he'd be able to do that, right? So I had already started making plans to accommodate Uncle John when he came home. Because, you know, he needed to build up his strength, right? And then he disappeared. So those plans went out the door, and I'm like, okay, you never have to worry about that now. Well, fast forward till today, and now I'm finding myself, well, okay, Amari is, listen to me, people, this is so serious. Amari is, like, getting heavier, right? Because he's a growing little boy. And the only problem with Amari, though, is he can't help you lift him. Because he can't control his body. He can't even use his hands. He's still, one hand is very much like this, and the other one, you know, he's like this, right? You have to try and pry open his fingers to help him hold his bottle. And even then, he can't hold the weight for very long. Whether he doesn't realize it or whether he just can't do it. And I'm like, okay, this little boy's going to get heavier. And I'm kind of like going back to where I was with Uncle John. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, you're only 92 pounds with clothes on, Judy. Like, how do you realistically plan on moving this child when he's 3 and 4 years old? You know, it's easy enough to carry him right now because he's little. But what's going to happen when he's 3 and 4? Never mind 2. 2 I can handle. 3 and 4, I don't know. I've been talking to Tisha about it, you know. May have to move because you might have to get special equipment and just the whole 9 yards, right? So in the meantime, I'm thinking, well, you know, in another year from now, what would I do? So hypothetically, I'm like, okay, well, you know those little push cars for little children, you know, strap them on there. Okay, we're going to go for a ride, you know, go through the hall. He's sitting, you know, he's sitting up because he likes to sit up. It's just he can't hold his body up, right? So he needs help with it. And, you know, get him to point A to point B, and then, you know, you learn to adjust and put him down, and then if you need to go back, you put him in the chair and little wheelie car thing, and you go down the hall, and I'm like right there with Uncle John again. I'm right there with Uncle John. And I tell myself, well, if you were going to do it for Uncle John, you're going to do it for Amari, right? No matter what, you're going to get through it. You know, we stick together as a family. Those were Uncle John's words. We stick together as a family. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, people. So this doctor that I met yesterday, all in all, throughout my years of living in this country, before it turned into the Congo, I had pretty good patient-doctor relationships with my doctors over the years. Nothing stands out. Nothing stands out where except for maybe Dr. Ghoul with Chimay in the brain. Only because he was all dressed in black and he wanted me to notice that, people. Like, seriously, what doctor comes to you all dressed in black from the tip of his toes to the freaking top of his, like this, right? All in black with shiny, 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 shiny patented black shoes. You can't help but notice that, right? You know, like the Grim Reaper telling me that my daughter is, like, dead because there's no white brain matter in the x-ray. So, but outside of that, like, all my baby doctors were good doctors. And some of them I had a blast with, laughing, cracking jokes with Marcane. That doctor, he was a funny doctor. He was a great doctor, right? You know, my family doctor is pretty good for me over the years. He doesn't, you know, he's not overly intrusive and pushy. And, you know, he's not trying to make money off of the freaking public, you know, tax dollars in terms of overbilling. And, you know, he gives, if you want, you take. If you don't want, you know, he doesn't criticize you or turn you away. You know, he listens to you, right? And he's there, you know what I mean? Well, this guy that I met yesterday, I'm thinking is kind of along the same lines, right? Because it's really important that when you have a child that has special needs, I would think that you would need to have a very good working relationship and doctor-patient relationship for the benefit of the child, right? So in light of all these bad things that have happened to my family and to my loved ones, you know, it's very hard for me to trust doctors in general these days, because ultimately it was a doctor in the temporary care ward over there where they released Uncle John into the clutches of his long-lost sister who took his life and destroyed it. Basically, it was a doctor that signed that one, right? It's just we haven't gone that far into court yet, people, to find out what doctor did it and why. Right? You know, because we're dealing with a beehive mentality, right? They want to protect the hive. They want to protect the honeycombs, and the honeycombs equals to the dollar amount of how much each individual is worth, whether dead or alive. So, of course, I'm cynical, because for me, I see Chimay as worth more dead to the healthcare system than she was alive. Amari kind of now represents a modge-podge of things in terms of, one, obviously his physical health, and thank God he was born in Canada, because he will get proper attention in terms of medical stuff, right? But then on the other hand, because we're living in such a corrupt freaking society where it's money, 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 and control, 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 and hurt, 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 you know what I mean? Like, Amari is very much at risk to be exploited, right, for those tax dollars, you know, for those extra tests or whatever it is. And because it's related to the brain, you know, everything's related to the brain. Uncle John was related to the brain. They destroyed his fucking brain so they could take control of his assets. That's what happened, people. I wouldn't be surprised, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I wouldn't be surprised if those people didn't give Uncle John shock therapy at the Victoria General Hospital once they transported him over there. Because that hospital has a history of doing that to old people so that old people don't fight to go back to their families. And I have printed out shit on that. So when it goes to court, Fraser Health will be reminded of that, because they're not so squeaky clean. And then Chimay, you know, what about Chimay? She was only hooked up to machines for 8 days when, in fact, she should have been in a coffin. Like, how does that make any sense, people? And her brain was the target, too, if you notice, right? Oh, well, you know, we're checking her brain to see if there's any brain activity. When, in fact, all they had to fucking do was take something really fucking cold, you know, put it here, put it there, and it would have determined that she was brain dead, which they already knew. they hooked her up to the machines anyway for some bullshit crap experiment. Whether it was a social experiment on the family or whether it was a social experiment on the community for all the people that came in to visit Shmay thinking she was alive, because that's what the healthcare staff was telling them. Not me. It was the healthcare staff telling them that. Also, they could take another fucking picture of her brain. And then eventually, when they realized that her body was rotting, because they knew it would, because the doctor warned me, if we kept it on the freaking machines for too long, it was going to get ugly for the nurses. Fucking right, it was going to get ugly for the nurses. Because the skin starts falling off, you know, it just explode, it just slides off, you know, just all kinds of crazy shit starts to happen. And she was right at that cusp for it to happen when they finally fucking turned off the machines. When those machines should never have been on in the first place, because the paramedics should have seen the signs. As a matter of fact, they probably did see the signs, but they ignored it. Because once the body gets to the hospital, it opens up a fucking ledger. You know, where there's unlimited funds for this test and that test and do this and do that. And that's what we know on the outside. That's not what we know what they're doing in the background, not telling fucking people through their black budgets. Right? And this is what my grandson is going into, people. By no fault of his own, because he's just a little baby that's 13 months old now. Just a little baby. He didn't ask to be in this position. And then to make matters worse, the people that are supposedly supposed to love him are arguing. And I told this to the doctor. I said, Jesus, I don't know. I don't want you, the doctor, to get all stressed out because of family arguments, right? Because it's pretty bad right now, considering what happened to Shmay and what's been going on since then, right? So how do you establish a good working patient-doctor relationship with those kind of skeletons in the closet that are rattling their bones? Rattle, rattle, rattle. They're just fucking rattling, just rattling all the time, fucking rattling. It never stays quiet. Because people want to argue. All right? So that's pretty much where I'm at in life. Right? On top of vinyl and looking for housing that you can't find and, you know, just the whole 9 yards, right? Anyway, bottom line, I'm okay with this doctor. He's an experienced doctor. I could see that. He knew what he was doing, right? He's confident. You know, he's established, right? He has a good reputation, right? You know, and he cares about his patients because, you know, he's been doing it for a long time, right? That's like me, you know, for as much as it's hard for me to deal sometimes with homeless people or whatever, right? You know, they have needs or whatever, and I try and accommodate, and I wouldn't say accommodate, I try to assist with those needs wherever I can assist when I can, right? Whether it's washing the vinyl to sell it to get money for a damage deposit for another house, or whether it's, you know, giving somebody $5 or $10 or $20, or whether it's giving them something to eat, or whatever it is, employing them. I employ actually quite a few homeless people. Not as much as I'd like to, people, but I do. And so that helps them, right? And they like it. So they actually come to me and ask me for money, not money, but work so that they can get money. And I'm like, that's where I have to write that $300,000 and get those people working, right? $300,000 fundraiser, because that $300,000 fundraiser, you know, you can take, oh my God, 50,000 at least, and just infuse it back into the community with just general employment for like general whatever it is in the community, so that you're hiring the ones that really need it, right? And that could be something as simple as raking grass. Not everything has to be, you know, brain power, right? Sometimes it's just manual power that's important. So anyway, So Amari is going into a whole bunch of testing. We're going to try and do it within a 4 or 5 day period. Well, 2 day period, 3 day period. Right? Where it's not spread out over 6 months here and 6 months there, because you have to put the referral in as baby goes in. And over a couple, 2-3 days, all these tests, including brain scans. Uncle John got brain scans. Why were they giving Uncle John brain scans when he went into the hospital with pneumonia, knowing that he had delirium? Because they had to build a case, right? So that when I challenged the doctor on it, oh, well, he had white matter in his brain, and therefore, that's what makes him confused. When in fact, no, you were giving him sedation without his knowledge, telling him it was a calcium pill, because you were plotting and scheming behind his back because the sister wanted his body so she could steal his money. And the beehive mentality allowed that to happen. Right? All to do with the brain, people. Ultimately, in the end, Uncle John's brain got destroyed. And he died an old, miserable man, lonely for his family. Shimei, the minute she went in, it was all about the brain. When in fact, they fucking knew the brain was dead. And it simply could have been done with some dry ice, stick here, stick there. She would have shown nothing, and she would have been pronounced fucking dead like she should have been. Okay? But instead, no, they got the heart going. For some reason, because they got the heart going, they felt that they had the right to do what they wanted with that body for 8 fucking days. Okay? With the brain. And, what do you call it? In the end, it's just one big pile of mess. Right? That's just starting to be sorted out. And on Amari's brain now is one of the key factors as to what's wrong with him. Because whatever is wrong with him, that doctor did say it had to do with the brain. Because at some point, his brain was injured and was deprived of oxygen, which brought on the symptoms of a broad spectrum of cerebral palsy. That's how I would classify it as. And the doctor wants to know what it was that caused it. So, him having these tests is to help to determine an answer to that question. How fast, how effective, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't have that kind of experience. But the fella that I met yesterday, I think he's very confident in what he does, so that makes me feel comfortable. And on average, I've had better relationships with doctors than I have had not good relationships with doctors. Right? And Amari is just a baby. He has his whole life ahead of him. And just because he has, physical mobility problems does not mean that his brain itself has been affected. I hope that these tests that they put him through does not affect his brain, because even if he can't move as a man too much, he hopefully will still have a brain where he can utilize that brain and live his life to the best of the ability that he'll be able to live, right? And I think for all this strife that I'm finding myself in the middle of, in terms of who gets Amari, right? Because it's all about control and fucking ego or whatever it is. I don't think that's good for the doctor to have to be up in the middle of that shit. Right? So I'm going to just try and keep things very level. Cordial, civil, and level. Doesn't necessarily mean I like it, but I have to be fair, right? Because nobody knows. We're all in the dark here, people. Right? So that's pretty much what's going on.